everyone, and welcome to yet another not-so-weekly progress log. I filmed for about 10 or 12 days this time instead of an actual week. And I did that because I was kind of all over the place in this video and I didn't end up getting a lot done until like the 5th or 6th day. So I decided to continue it on for a little bit longer. As I said, I was kind of all over the place in this video. I wanted to start on something new, but I couldn't really decide what to start on. So I sketched a lot of things and I drafted a lot of things and I made a lot of mock-ups, and then I would just lose interest and move on to something else. So you see quite a bit of that in this video. But I was also working on 2 hats, and I did end up finishing my 1890s taffeta dress and starting on 2 new projects. There's also a little bit of progress on Edwardian foundation garments. So I really hope you enjoy seeing all of that come together, and I shall see you at the end. Today I'm working on some hats, and I've already drafted the first one, which is this weird sort of sideways thing, and now I just have to draft this tricorn hat, which is based off an example from Harper's Bazaar magazine from the early 1900s. So that'll probably be a little bit more difficult to draft, but hopefully I can get it done quickly, and then I'll have hand sewing that I can work on today. The second hat pattern is done, at least I think it is. It looks very different from any hat pattern I've done before, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it'll work. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut these out of interfacing, and then later tonight I'll sew wire into them. All done, and now I'm going to go ahead and put a corset on and try on a mock-up that I made yesterday. I'm not feeling too confident about it, but I'm not going to be able to get it fit any better without trying it on and figuring out what alterations need to be made. Ta-da! So I spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours last night, but I did end up getting all the wire sewn into my interfacing pieces. And I think they turned out pretty well. I'm actually really happy with the shape of the Edwardian tricorn, which I really wasn't expecting. So I can start covering these pieces with fabric today and stuffing, and they should start to take form, even more so than they have already. Today's plans are actually different than I was originally expecting. I tried on a mock-up yesterday, and that mock-up was supposed to be for an Edwardian suit, which is what's going to go with this hat. Now the mock-up could have fit quite nicely with relatively minimal alterations, but there's no way that I could alter the fit to give me the correct Edwardian silhouette. And that's because I'm using a corset that's better for like the 1880s than the early 1900s. And I don't really want to make a more accurate corset right now. So I think instead I'm going to make a bust pad and a bust cover, which will give the more barrel-shaped chest look from that period without me having to make an S-bend corset. And even when I do get around to making a more Edwardian accurate corset, I can use those to further exaggerate the shape. And since I want the suit to be quite fitted, I should really make the shirt that goes underneath it before trying to fit and adjust the suit mock-up. So I'm going to try and make major progress on those pieces today, which I wasn't even planning on starting this week, so that's quite the change. And I'd also like to draft and drape a new project. I realize that once I'm done with these, I'm not going to have any hand sewing to do downstairs, and I like having a hand sewing project that I can work on while I watch TV. So I'm thinking of starting an elaborate 1880s evening gown, since that will have a lot of beading and sequining involved with it. So I drafted the skirt for the 1880s project. I was originally going to draft the bodice, but then I realized that I should probably do the skirt first, so I know how to shape the bodice over the hips, since it will extend past the waistline. The skirt actually has probably an equal amount of embellishment and beading as the bodice. I'm using this fabric as a base, and then I'm going to go ahead and sequin it pretty densely. So getting the skirt drafted means I can work on this, which will be nice and a fun little hand sewing project to have downstairs. This is my rough sketch for the bodice, and this is what I'm basing it off of. So that should keep me busy. I may actually end up working on this. I know I was going to do the Edwardian foundation garments and get that prepared so I can work on the suit, but I'm really excited about this, so I think I might just work on this today and leave the suit for tomorrow. This is the lace I'm going to use for this project, and when it was cut, the person didn't cut around the lace appliques, he cut through them. So a lot of them were damaged and shedding beads, so I just pulled out all the beads from the appliques that had damage to them. Then the rest of these appliques and the borders on each edge are going to be fussy cut out, and I think I'm actually going to do that today. I did finish the skirt pattern, so I'm going to cut out the front panel from jacquard, and then I could potentially start embellishing that today too. So yesterday was not as productive as I'd hoped. I'd hoped to make major progress on this panel and get like a significant portion of it embellished, and it just didn't happen. It ended up going a lot slower than I was expecting, and then my first 2 attempts I really hated, so I ended up ripping them out. Now I've come up with something that I like better, but I still don't really like it. I almost want to just rip them off and leave the fabric plain, but at the same time I think it will look really cool once I have it all done. It's really frustrating to work on something when you don't like how it looks, even if you know that it'll probably look better once you're finished. So I think today I'm going to do what I planned to do yesterday, and that will include working a little bit on my 1890s orange dress, and also figuring out the Edwardian foundation garments and potentially draping the blouse that will go over top of them. I think I have the best pad pattern ready, so I'm going to get cutting this out and start piecing it together. I raided my linen and chemise stuff drawer, and I think I'm going to try and use this cotton gauze for it. I finished it! I honestly didn't do a very good job on this. I did it completely by machine, and when I was binding the pieces I didn't even bother to use pins. So it's really rough around the edges, but I think it will work just fine for what I'm going for. And now I'm going to pin this onto my dress form and drape the corset cover slash ruffly blouse that will go over top of it. I have decided to restart the Edwardian camisole. This is where I left off last night, and this is unlined. The ruffles aren't the correct width. There are raw edges on a whole bunch of things, and I didn't even bother to change my thread to make it the right color. And I'm just really unhappy with how it's turned out. This time I'm making it from a very lightweight Kona cotton, and then it's lined with muslin. So it is quite a bit thicker than the cotton gauze, but I think it will be okay, and it's still cotton, so it should be very breathable. And then instead of homemade ruffles, I'm going to use this lace that I picked up in Pennsylvania, and I think I'm going to do 4 tiers of it. So this is the finished camisole. I really do feel like it's made out of fabric that's too heavy, but it gives the right silhouette and it's perfectly fine for this project. And now I'm going to put this on my dress form and draft the blouse that will go over top of it. It's much later in the day now. I think I last filmed around noon or 1 o'clock, but I did have a productive couple hours. I just didn't film them. I did drape the Edwardian blouse pattern, and then I transferred it onto paper, which is what you're seeing here. So I'm going to work on this a little bit later on in the week. My main priority for tomorrow is to film the process of making and to make the 1950s dress that I mentioned earlier today. The pattern for this is really weird. It's a 2-piece bodice pattern, and the sleeves are not a separate pattern, they're just attached at the shoulder. And then this is actually the center front, and it forms a straight line once the dart is sewn up. So it's really not the type of dress pattern you'd see nowadays, but it is based off of a dress from the 1950s, so I think it's relatively accurate as far as patterns go. I did drape it instead of flat drafting it because this looks like nothing. This just looks like craziness, and I would never be able to figure out or make up a pattern like this if I didn't have a dress form to drape off of, because this is so not how my mind would assume it would look. But I did make a mock-up for this, so I have tested it, and it looked pretty great. So I'm ready to move forward with this project tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. Hello everyone! So I didn't film yesterday because yesterday didn't go that well. As I said, I was working on a 1950s inspired dress, and I chose to make it out of this sheer floral fabric. Unfortunately, when I was putting together the bodice, I made a mistake when sewing the lining, so I chose to recut it, and that meant that I didn't have enough lining left to cut out the skirt. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that until after I'd already cut out the overlay for the skirt and finished the bodice. So I spent probably 3 or 4 hours yesterday working on this and getting it to a stage where it's wearable, and unfortunately I don't have enough fabric to cut out the skirt, and I don't have any way of getting more of this fabric. This is a shantung that I've had in my collection for years, so there's no way to get more of it, and the lining really needs to match since it is visible underneath this sheer fabric. On the bright side, the bodice fits beautifully. The pattern totally worked. I love the way it fits and the way it looks. It's great. So I am going to hold on to this fabric and this bodice, and maybe I'll turn it into the top of a romper or something like that someday, but it's definitely not going to be the 1950s wonderfulness that I had in mind. I still want to make this magical 1950s dress, especially now that I've seen how well the pattern worked and fit. So I'm considering using this polka dot fabric for that, but I'm kind of wondering if I should take a day break from this project. I think I may just work on my orange taffeta project for a little bit and think on it. I did end up making some progress on that yesterday. This really isn't a great angle, but I sewed on the collar, and now I just have to sew hooks onto the back of the collar, sew on another button or two at the waistline, make the waistband, and sew on the skirt. And that's literally it. So I did a bit of work on the orange taffeta dress. I finished sewing on the collar and then I sewed on hooks and bars so the collar can be done up. And then I actually sewed it onto the skirt. And unfortunately I didn't film any of that for some reason, but I will show you what it looks like later today and show you the process of getting that finished. But my main plan for today, I've decided, is remaking that 1950s inspired dress. Except this time around I'm going to be using this blue polka dot peach skin, a few buttons for decoration, and this cotton broadcloth for lining. Since the peach skin is quite drapey, I think lining it with something a little bit stiffer is going to look the best. I'm feeling quite confident today because my nails are suitably sparkly, and I did download some new music, so hopefully that will make the process feel like it's going a little bit faster and a little bit more fun. So here's a little update. I got the bodice assembled out of the polka dot fabric, and it's lined with the plain cotton broadcloth that I showed earlier. It fits beautifully and I really love the way it looks. I think this print suits the dart pattern a lot more than the floral print I used earlier. I'm still pretty bummed that I wasted the floral fabric and had to remake this, but I'm really happy with the end result. And I have already cut out the skirt, and there was enough fabric for the skirt, so I'm feeling very good about that as well. As a matter of fact, the skirt is over here. Now I just have to level off the hem of the polka dot one. Since it has been hanging for a few hours, it's probably warped, as circle skirts always do since they're cut on the bias. And then I can get those sewn together. I'm calling it quits for now. It's after 1 o'clock. My neck kind of hurts. I think it's time for lunch. But I did get these circle skirts sewn together and the hemline is pinned. So now I just have to top stitch across there tomorrow, bind the waistline, sew that onto the bodice, and then put in the zipper and potentially 2 decorative buttons. And that'll be it. So this should come together really quickly tomorrow. At least fingers crossed that it will. And I'm really pleased with the progress and the length and everything, so I'm so glad I decided to reattempt this and that it's turned out so much better this time. I'm going to do some editing, but I'm also going to try and finish this hat so I can get it trimmed tomorrow. I did come up with some sort of cap pattern to go underneath it. It looks really messy, but that's okay since it's going to be covered with feathers and flowers and stuff like that. So I finished the polka dot dress and I absolutely love it. I think it's so cute and it fits so nicely and it's so flattering and comfortable, and it really just makes me regret all the crappy dresses I've purchased from H&M that don't fit me as nicely and are too short and end up falling apart, because for the same price and about 6 hours of time I could have a dress like this. It's really opened my eyes to that, and it's made me want to make some clothing that I can actually wear on a daily basis, which isn't something I really ever thought I would be saying. So maybe next time Joann's has a really good sale, I'll take a peek and see what they have, because I would love to have a dress like this in my everyday wardrobe, potentially in 3 different colors. I might take a little browse around Etsy tonight and see if there are any other dresses and styles from this period that I think would be fun to make. So we'll see if that ends up happening, but in the meantime I'm going to work on my orange taffeta dress. I have to sew the waistband onto it and then sew on I think 2 more buttons, and then it will be finished. And I'll also show you how the hat for that project is coming along, because I did make some progress on it last night as well. Here is the finished hat base. It isn't very pretty, but I think once I dress it up with some flowers and bows and feathers, it will look really freaking cute. But I do want to get the dress finished first, so that's going to be my #1 priority for this afternoon. So I just finished sewing on the waistband, and then I sewed on 2 loops to the waistband and the final 2 buttons. And this dress still needs a modesty panel, but other than that, it's finished, which is really exciting. I'll show you how this looks on my dress form later in the video, but I think for now I'm going to work on the coordinating hat and try and get that finished before it's time for lunch. So I might actually film the whole process of that and then speed it up and show it to you, and yeah, it's probably going to be a trial and error sort of process. I don't have a specific design or pattern for the flowers and feathers in mind, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. It's done! I'm not super thrilled with it, but I think it looks cute and I can always add more or peel stuff off later, depending on how I'm feeling. But now I'm home alone and the dogs are going crazy, so I'm gonna go downstairs and take care of them and get some lunch and do some writing and hopefully I'll make a little bit more progress later today. So I just finished the edges of the modesty panel for the orange taffeta dress, and now all I have to do is sew this in, and then the dress will be done, and I can get started on something new, which will be very exciting. So that's what I'm going to do now. The modesty panel is in, which means this is done, and though I haven't tried it on yet, I'm really happy with how this project has gone and how it's turned out. If you've been following me for a while, then you might know that this is my second attempt at making a dress of this style from this period, and the first attempt didn't go very well at all. It took me many months to complete. It didn't really fit. I wasn't happy with the construction of it and the design. So making it again out of a much nicer material and having the construction go so much better, and I don't know, everything went so much better, and I'm so pleased with it. So now I'm going to do up all the buttons so I can photograph it, and then I get to decide on something new. Hello everyone! So I'm back to progress logging. I took a few days off there. I was just responsible for watching the dogs, and I was trying to get videos filmed and stuff done, and I just didn't really think to pick up the camera in between all of that. And when I was looking over the footage, I realized even the days before that, I really didn't film very much. So I'm sorry for that. I'm going to continue this for a few extra days and try and really pick up the camera and show you every step, and hopefully we can get quite a bit done. So today I'm going to be working on this dress, and I've been filming the process of making this dress. And it's just relatively simple, and it's made out of this cute jersey fabric from Joann's. It has a circle skirt bottom, and then the top edge is going to be bound with bias tape. I originally bound it with bias tape and had it tie at the shoulders, but I thought it looked really sort of clumsy since this fabric is quite thick. So I ripped that off, and luckily I had enough fabric left to cut out more bias binding, and now I'm going to try and do it again but make it continuous, and I think that will look a lot cuter. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to move on to working on this plaid 1830s ensemble. I'm sort of second guessing the design for this. I was originally going to do something quite simple, a straight waist, off the shoulder collar, big poofy sleeves, but I decided to change that to a basque waist, and I put the pleats at a sharper angle. And I'm more excited about this design since it's different than anything I've done before, but I'm worried that the design is a little bit too complicated for the fabric, since the fabric itself is this very busy plaid. But I've already cut it out, so I might as well assemble it and see what it looks like, and I have my fingers crossed. I'm hoping that it will all turn out and that it will look really good, but I'm feeling a bit unsure right now. Guess what I finished? I'm actually really happy with how this turned out. I think the straps are a little bit too long for me, and if I did it again, I would place the waist tie further back instead of in the side seam, because that can cause a bit of awkward bunching right here. But for the most part, I think it's a cute dress, and it's one that I would definitely buy if I saw it in stores, so I think that's a good sign. There was a little bit of a mess up with the top stitching, and I couldn't really redo it since the fabric's already quite delicate from when I ripped the bias tape off the first time. So I'm not thrilled with that, but I don't think it's too noticeable when the dress is worn. And then the back just looks like this. So it's about 5 inches too big for me in the waist, and then it just ties down to fit nicely, and it gives the back a really cute gathered look, which I love. And then the skirt pattern is just a circle skirt. There will be a video about making this dress, and it might already be up, and if that's the case, then I will link to it down below. And now I'm going to go ahead and get to work on the plaid bodice. I'm going to try and get the collar pleated and get some of the pieces assembled. So I got the pleated panels for the 1830s dress finished. I just marked the pleat lines out with chalk, and then ironed them in place. I am going to sew these down from the underside, just add a few tacking stitches so they will hold this shape no matter how much the dress is worn and tossed about and everything like that. But they're looking pretty good so far, and they're looking pretty symmetrical, which I'm happy with. And by looking symmetrical, I mean that the pleat size and width and everything is looking symmetrical. I know the pattern doesn't line up perfectly, and I really wasn't aiming for that because I think it looks kind of cool being a little bit more random. So that's what's going on here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and pin together the rest of the bodice. Actually, that's a lie. I can't do that because I need to make piping before doing that. So I guess I will cut out these strips for the piping, and then maybe I can get the piping done, and that might be it for this afternoon. In my attempt to make piping, this keeps happening, so there's clearly something wrong with the bobbin or the way my machine's threaded, and I just honestly can't be bothered to work it out right now, so I think I'm going to go downstairs and have some lunch, and then this task will be finished later in the evening. Good morning, everyone. So I got my sewing machine back into working order this morning, and then I made the piping for the bodice. Now I'm just going to go ahead and sew together the collar, and then I can sew piping onto the shoulder, because ideally I'd get this all pinned together today so I can see how it fits, and if it fits nicely then I can turn this edge inward and start adding piping to that. I'm a little bit nervous about trying to get these matched up and sewn together, so keep your fingers crossed for me that it goes well, and I will report back after it's done. So the pleats lined up really nicely on my first attempt. I'm very happy with that, but these lines don't line up, and I wasn't trying to get them to line up. I didn't even realize they were that close to lining up. But now that I know they're that close, it's going to bother me that it's like an 1/8 inch off, so I'm going to have to rip out half the seam and redo that. Much better. So now I'm going to go ahead and add piping to the shoulder and then sew it onto the other pleated panel. So I just finished tacking down all the pleats and I sewed the shoulder seam. The tacking stitches prevent the pleats from coming undone, so when you pull on it like this, they still warp out of shape, but when you let go, they bounce right back. Few visible stitches from the front side of the fabric. Unfortunately, this material is just so thin, it was difficult to control, but for the most part, they're all hidden. You can see what they look like here. They're just large basting stitches that go through all the layers of the fabric except for the top layer, so for the most part, they aren't visible from the outside. I was hoping to finish up the bodice today, but I think instead I'm going to work on the sleeves and I'm going to draft the top portion of the sleeve pattern. And I'm doing that because I want to get this project put together quite quickly, and I know the sleeves will require quite a bit of hand sewing. So if I get it drafted now, then I can work on it this afternoon and tonight, and maybe even have them done by tomorrow, which would be awesome. My iron has started making the most annoying noise. It's like a creaking, and it happens when I'm using it, and then after I finish using it. Other than the noise, it's perfectly fine, so I can't get a new one, but oh my god, it's driving me crazy. On the bright side, I did get the sleeve pattern drafted, at least the top portion of it, and it just looks like this, and it's made from 2 pieces. And I actually didn't bother drafting the pattern I'm going to cut out of the plaid fabric because it's so huge. So instead I've just cut out strips, and I'm going to cartridge pleat these strips down to about 1/4 of their current length, and then I will cut them to be the right shape. But before doing that, I have to mark where the gathers are going to be. I've already marked it on the pattern, so now I just need to transfer that onto the fabric with a ruler and some chalk. I got the panels for one sleeve completely gathered. As you can tell, there are 4 rows of gathering on this one, and 3 rows of gathering on this one, and they were all done by hand. I actually think I made them a little bit too long, so I might end up sewing this piece to here instead of here, which is kind of a bummer because that means I wasted time gathering a row that I didn't need to, but I suppose it could be worse. In addition to getting this amount done, I also got another one of these panels almost finished. I just have one more row of gathering to do, so I'll get that finished this afternoon along with the second one of these. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and turn the edges of the collar inward and hopefully make a bit more progress on constructing the bodice. So that's the plan for today, and I shall keep you updated. So I turned the bottom edge of the collar inward, and then I sewed piping onto the top edge. It didn't turn out quite as even as I'd hoped it would be, but I guess it will match the piping in the seams because I had a similar issue with those. So not ideal, but I think that's as good as it's going to get, unfortunately. I also sewed facings into the bodice, and then I marked a line 3/4 of an inch away from the top edge, which is where the collar is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it in place and then do a quick little fitting and see how it looks. And if it looks good, then I can sew it on and move on to hemming the bottom edge. So I got the collar sewn on and I did the fitting, and it's looking really good. I'm actually really happy with the length of it, so I can go ahead and sew the piping on. I just have to turn this edge inward first. So last night I got the lining cut out, and then this morning I assembled it. I also turned the bottom edge of the bodice inward and sewed piping on. So now the bodice is ready to be fitted and then lined, and that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to give it a quick little try on, and if that goes well, then I'll start sewing this lining in, and it will be sewn in by hand just to avoid having any visible top stitching. So I just finished sewing the lining in, and that took way longer than it should have. The sewing part was actually pretty quick. It just took a really long time to get it pinned in place in a way where it wasn't pulling on the outer layer of the fabric and warping the pattern. But I did manage, and now it's done, and I think I'm going to pop it on my dress form and then show you what it looks like. Here it is. It really does not fit my dress form very well at all. That's partially because it's supposed to be off the shoulder, and my shoulders are far more sloped than the dress forms, and I also have a smaller bust. So it looks much better when worn, but this at least gives you some sort of an idea of how it's turning out. It's so busy, I don't feel like the patterning and pleating details really show up, but I also kind of love how busy and obnoxious it is. I think it really suits the period. So I'm happy with this so far and I'm excited to see how it turns out. And on that note, I think I'm going to end this video. I'd really hope to show more of the sleeve making process and everything like that, but I feel like this is a really good stopping point. But before doing that, I am going to show you what this dress looks like on my dress form because I promised that earlier in the video and I didn't get around to it. So here it is. My camera's gone very blue and it isn't really showing the color the way it should, but you can see how it looks. There's a little bit of petticoat sticking out at the bottom, but I'm going to hem this petticoat to be an inch shorter, so that won't be an issue when I finally get around to wearing it. And yeah, I absolutely love how this turned out. I think it's so pretty and I'm so happy with it, even though it ended up looking a lot more like the dress from Crimson Peak than I had intended. But if you're curious about that whole story and more about the process of making this, I'll have a blog post linked down below where I go into it. Yeah, that's all the progress I'm going to be sharing in this video. There is still a lot of time left in the day, but I have to write a voiceover and film a voiceover for a video. And I also have to photograph myself wearing both of those dresses. And I really want to finish cartridge pleating the sleeves for the 1830s project today. So I'm going to try and get all of that done this afternoon and hopefully make a dent in editing this video as well. So now I'm going to cut to a quick little wrap up and that will be it. So really quickly, I just wanted to go through everything that I accomplished this week. The biggest accomplishment for me was definitely finishing the 1890s project. Then as you saw, I drafted 2 hats and ended up finishing one of them, which I'm very pleased with. I also made the pads and the camisole for an Edwardian project, which I don't think I'm going to end up using anytime soon, but I am happy with how they turned out. And I started on my 1880s project, which is going really well. I know I didn't talk about it very much in this video, but I spent a good hour or two every night working on the skirt panel and embellishing it. And though it still isn't done, I have made some major progress on that and I'm really enjoying how it's coming along. I'm definitely liking it more now than I was when I last talked about it in the video. And then there's my 1830s project, and I'm pretty happy with that too. It fits nicely. I think it looks as good as it can considering the print. I think I maybe should have gone for the simpler design just considering how bold the print is. But I do love how it's turned out and I love how ridiculous it is. And I think that's everything, though I might be forgetting something. When I look back, it was a very productive week or two, but it probably would have been even more productive if I could have figured out what I wanted to get started on and not ended up wasting so many days on designs that didn't end up happening. But sometimes that's part of the creative process, so I'm not going to beat myself up too badly over it. And that really is everything for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about any of the projects mentioned in this video, definitely check out the description box. I will have blog posts up detailing the construction process about most of the things mentioned in this video, or at the very least I'll have more progress posted about them on my Instagram or my Tumblr. And as per usual, I will have the playlist of all my weekly progress logs linked down below in case you missed one. Thanks again for watching, and I shall talk to you all very soon.